8:06 the time. News Talk 1270 KIML, the radio station. My name is Glenn Woods. Thanks for joining me. 682-1270 is the phone number. Phones do sound a little funny, but I can still get you on the air. Got to get the engineer to take a look at that sometime this weekend. Right now, joining me from Cheyenne. Boy, you made sure, of course, I guess, because people now that are joining me by this right away get very self-conscious, and I bet you spend a little extra time there making sure the hair looks right and all that kind of stuff, right?
What is this about having to worry about that on the radio?
I don't know. But this is what I do every single day now. I actually make sure, am I shaved? Or my nose hairs trimmed, stuff like that. This is Amy Edmonds. She's from Republic Free Choice. Is that right?
Yeah, Wyoming Liberty Group and the Republic Free Choice.
Okay. Now, you wrote an interesting little article that has to do with Wyoming public schools, which I thought asked a pretty good question because I've been asking this myself. It has to do with accountability, and it deals a lot with taking tests. Could you tell everybody what the article basically is about?
Well, as you know, the Wyoming legislature, or maybe you don't know, the Wyoming legislature has been embarked on education accountability. They've passed two fairly large bills in the past 2 years, really headed toward trying to create some kind of accountability system in the state. And this system essentially would test our kids. They would take those test scores, and in a huge, very complicated process that is getting a lot of attention, the scores would go into a score for each school, every single school. So every single school in Gillette would have a score, and then there would be consequences for those scores, essentially. And that's what they're working on right now.
Okay, now to play devil's advocate for a moment here, I think in part of your article you questioned that scoring system, and am I right, you started talking a little bit more about individual students rather than the students in a system?
Yeah, I have a couple of points. First of all, I think there are many who've been watching this, and particularly legislators, who are a little bit troubled that we're headed perhaps in the wrong direction. First one is testing. We seem to be adding a lot of tests. We haven't been taking any tests away. That's, I think, an issue. And I point out really that I think we have to have focus on why are we testing, what are we trying to achieve in testing, and if we need to remove some tests, then let's do it. And I think we do. Too much testing is simply not good. And then the second point is, yes, they go down the road of creating an actual scoring system for schools. Right now, and I will read you what they're calling it. They're calling those scores exceeding expectation, meeting expectation, partially meeting expectation, or not meeting expectation.
Whatever happened to A, B, C, F?
That's exactly, Glenn. That's my point. I think a simple. I know other states, Florida has done this. They grade their schools A, B, C, and D. I think we want it to be simple, and we want it to be transparent.
Okay, simple works a whole lot better. Now, what about also, well, let me play both sides of this. First off, there is teaching to the child. I mean, I went through school with dyslexia. Not a whole lot was known about it at the time, so I struggled through school. But now we have teachers in the classroom who look for those special needs students and work with them so they can better keep up. But let's face it, not everybody learns the same way. Are we dealing with that?
No, I think you're absolutely right. And no, obviously my answer, and the answer here at Republic Free Choice, would be that we're not dealing with that, because first of all, the heart of children who have different learning styles is a need for parental choice. So parents can take their children anywhere they want to, either in the public schools, which I think struggle to address this issue, or any other school that they would want to go to. So I think that's an important element to this, and it was really the third point of my article, which is there seems to be absolutely no reason why we would embark on an education accountability system that does not allow parents to act on the results.
Right. Well, then the next part of that would be how then, and here's where I'm playing devil, because I agreed with your article, but let me play devil's advocate with you. How do we know how our schools are doing if we don't test our school?
Well, I don't think we're calling for not. I think the scores, understanding student performance is important. There are deeper questions about the number of tests we're giving and why we test. I mean, that in itself is an hour-long conversation, Glenn. Right, yeah. Why do we test kids? There's lots of answers. We test kids to see what they know and what they don't know. We test kids to help teachers be better teachers. We test kids to hold them accountable and to hold the school system accountable for the results. So, of course, very cynical people would say we test kids to make test makers and consultants rich.
Right.
But we test kids for a whole number of reasons. So, obviously, testing isn't going to go away, or assessment, as they call it. And scoring our schools, I think, is a very good idea because it gets to the heart of transparency. Parents need to know what's going on in their local public schools.
Could you name, out of the tests that Wyoming schools are currently involved in, what tests you would, let's say, just flat out throw away?
Oh my, that's a difficult question.
Comes to mind for some people.
Yeah, I'm sure. I think what we need to do is have a really good, open conversation about why we're testing and what we're trying to achieve. There's this whole push going toward career and college readiness. We're adding more testing in the higher grades. As a matter of fact, we had a huge debate this last session in the legislature over giving the ACT test in the 12th grade. And that managed to stay in because of a fairly big fight in conference committee over this bill, and the House position was very strong, and I agree with it. There is no reason to give the ACT in the 12th grade. These are seniors. They've already taken the ACT to go. They know if they're going to go to college or not. There's no buy-in for them to take it. The senator who wanted this wanted it because he wanted a data point, which I think is utterly silly. There are other ways we can see how the kids are doing, namely how their freshman year of college is. That's a great way to find out how how they did in high school. So that's one we could wipe off the books today, and I wouldn't be sad.
Another part of that, though, is I take a look at how we see our test scores in the state of Wyoming compared to other states around the nation. Then again, it's not a very fair comparison because we don't teach our kids the same. We don't test our kids the same. So we could look like we are way behind pretty much everybody in the nation when actually our students are doing better just because of the way that we teach and the way that we test. Our students may actually be, let's say, above Tennessee, but we look like we're below Tennessee.
Right. I think we have to be very careful about that. I think it is important. We live in a national and a global world, so obviously we do need to understand that. But I think individual states, and Wyoming needs to, first of all, set up a very rigorous curriculum, and then we need to test well based on that curriculum. And once we start doing those things right, then we start looking outside of the state and saying, hey, how are we doing nationally? It's difficult nationally because every state has a different set of standards. So No Child Left Behind allowed states to essentially set the bar. So some bars are really high and some bars are not so high. So sometimes it's difficult to really know how you're doing.
But now here, this may be, I don't know if this is within your pay grade, but let me give it a try. Why is it so difficult to find what to test kids for? I mean, there's certain basic things that we need to know when we get to a certain grade level. We should be at a certain level for reading, a certain level for writing, a certain level for math. And yet throughout the country, not just state by state, but even county by county, district by district, we're struggling to find the right tests. Why is that so difficult for us?
That's a great question. Well, I mean, I think the state has hired a number of consultants. I think the education community is very well connected. Everyone knows everyone. Tests have there's different purposes for giving tests. So we give our pause tests because we are testing to see how Wyoming students are standing up against Wyoming's curriculum. And so that's, you hear the teaching to the test idea. Some would like to add tests even on a weekly or every couple of week basis in the classroom, and those are to help teachers understand very quickly how their students are doing. Then we're adding all of these college and career readiness in high school, and that has obviously more to do with, are these kids now prepared to get into college? Are they prepared to go out into the workforce? So there are all different reasons why people are adding tests.
Right.
It makes it very confusing.
Yeah, it is. That's why I was saying that it's a very complicated question to ask, I know. But talking with Amy Edmonds, she's down in Wyoming Liberty Group, the Republic Free Choice, wrote an article, by the way, which is on my Facebook page. You can go ahead and read the entire article. So if you could have everything that you wanted out of this next legislative session, how would you set up testing in Wyoming?
I think I would definitely be taking a really hard look and asking some strong questions about why are we adding so many different tests.
Yeah.
If you take a look at what we've been doing in education accountability, and then you add on top of that another subject we haven't even discussed, and I hesitate to bring it up because it's a whole other one, but the state of Wyoming is a member of the Smarter Balance Consortium, which is part of this whole Common Core curriculum that the state adopted. This consortium now is, there's two consortiums in the United States. We're part of one of them. We're an advisory committee. They're moving toward all online testing. And some would say they're moving toward a unified national assessment. We are a member of that. So that adds a whole other layer of discussion of what are we doing and why are we doing it? What do we need to be doing? It would be my hope, one of the first things I would love to see happen is either the superintendent of public instruction or the governor remove us from the Smarter Balance Consortium. There's no reason for us to be in it. If we don't, the question to ask is, many say we need to stay in the Smarter Balance Consortium so we have a seat at the table as they develop these tests. But on the other hand, they say, but these tests are not going to be forced on states. So if they're not going to be forced on us, what do we need to be at the table for?
Well, then they say they're not going to be forced on us, but then again, don't we always feel compelled to pick up these tests?
Exactly, and that's my fear, is there's going to be yet another round. The technical requirements, recommendations from the Smarter Balance Consortium just came out, and I think many of Wyoming schools are going to struggle to meet them. It has to do with bandwidth per student. It has to do with upgrading software. There's a lot of requirements that I think Wyoming schools are going to struggle with. I think a lot of the more urban schools probably could meet them right away. But there's a lot of questions on testing. This legislative session, Glenn, if there's one thing I could get, and it's always the same thing I want every time, and that would be parental choice.
I'm going to head over to the phones now. I realize the phones do sound a little funny today. I got to get our engineer to take a look at it, but see if we can get a call in. This is Glenn. Who's on the phone?
I am listening to this program you've got this morning, and all of the testing that the state and feds, whoever are doing, are missing a whole point. It's not the education system that needs to be monitoring this. You talk to the kids, the employers that are hiring these kids, whether they're out of school, out of a tech school, out of college, doesn't matter. They can't write a complete sentence. They can't spell. They can't do math without a calculator. They can't.
And let me go ahead and I know where you're going with this. The only reason I'm going to let you go is because the phone really does sound funny. Amy, were you able to understand that?
Yeah, I got her point.
Go ahead.
And this is something I've heard many, many times, and I think it really does get to the heart of what are we teaching the kids? I mean, it's really about setting that rigorous curriculum. Natrona County just recently increased their graduation requirements, and I have to say congratulations to them. I think that's a great move. We need to set the bar even higher for our kids and recognize when we're failing. And one of the things that I think woke a lot of legislators up was this remedial work that's happening in our community colleges and our universities.
Well, and part of it, besides doing radio, I've managed retail stores as well. And one of the things I always did whenever I had a new kid, and I have to say kid because so many of the employees that I had were college age, so that's a kid to me at this point. And the first thing I would ask them is, do you know how to count back change? Not if, not might, not maybe, but when the power goes off and that computer doesn't work anymore, can we still stay open? Can you count back change? And not one of them could. And so, yeah, I really do wonder what we're teaching at this point. As far as I'm concerned, there's a lot in school. There's a lot that we've kept up with as far as technology. Our kids today are much more technically savvy, and I'm glad to see that. But on the other hand, I think like the caller had it right. There's a lot of basic skills that we've forgotten about, haven't we?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I hear this all the time, that kids are struggling with some of these just very basic things. And that, again, goes to the heart of what are we teaching kids? We need to make things much more rigorous. And also, I think, I agree with you. I'm very glad that they're technologically savvy. But I think there's a time to shut things off, open up a book, know how to read something deeply and understand it. You know, they say the internet, I think, makes kids an inch deep and a mile wide. I mean, you can click on the first page, read the first 3 paragraphs. That doesn't mean you have a solid grasp on a subject.
Right, and for that matter, this is a pen.
Right, exactly.
Learn how to use these things. Well, okay, now, how would you, and I know I'm really asking you, is something which maybe, again, you might not know enough about to answer the question, but I want your impression of this. If you could place Wyoming schools within the 50 states, how do you think we would rank?
As far as student achievement?
Yeah, like we're not number one schools in the nation,
No.
today, but would we be near the bottom, somewhere in the middle?
Somewhere in the middle.
Yeah,
somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what kind of skills do you think you'd like to see Wyoming students learn?
I think I would like probably, like I said, Natrona County increasing requirements. I'd love to see 4 years of math. I think the senior year in high school should not be a sort of slack off year.
I'm corny on that one. 4 years of math. What kind of math?
I think that really needs to, the final fourth year, I think, should be left up to the student. Because I just know from my experience, I was not going to be a calculus girl, but I might have been an algebra 2 girl.
Yeah. Yes.
So I think allowing kids, and also let's be creative. I mean, if we want to do economics, if we want to do business as a curriculum in the senior year for kids that might be going straight out and either taking a welding class and starting a small business, who really need those skill sets, let's give them that, but let's make sure that they're taking them.
Now, I don't think this is going to happen within my lifetime, but just between you and me, I'm a very libertarian-ish kind of guy. So for me, it's school vouchers, more private schools, more homeschooling would be the way to go rather than a public school system, which to me, like most other government programs, seems to be failing our students.
Yeah, that's I think the biggest concern that I have about the education accountability is, again, if we're going to all of this work, and it's a lot of work, the legislature's been doing it for 2 years, I suspect it's going to be several years more. Why in the world are we creating an accountability system where parents cannot act on that system? And when I mean act, I mean if you are sitting, let's say here in Laramie County, where you have families living next to a junior high that has been in remediation for 7 years, this is a true story, where they can't really move their child anywhere else. I think that's outrageous. I think parents should be able to, if they have a D school, they should be able to say, you know, I'm not sending my child to that school. I'm going to go to the A school.
Sure. Well, and there's, I even look at, but again, you tell me your impressions, how much money the state of Wyoming is spending on schools. And it seems to me like we spend plenty of money. I don't see why the state of Wyoming should spend any more money. It seems to me to be more of a matter of where those resources are going. And I'd like to shuffle that around as well.
Yeah, and we've seen that. I mean, we had a report out actually when Governor Freudenthal was still in office, and I think that Governor Freudenthal really sparked this whole move towards education accountability, because he was very concerned with. We did an audit taking a look at the funding model, which is the model that the legislature set up, and essentially a chunk of money goes into the funding model, it funnels out and goes to the school districts, and the school districts can then apply it how they want to. And what we saw was that, for example, here in Laramie County 1, they were something like 100 teachers short of the salary we had given them. So they were using that money, and they were much higher on administrators. And a lot of people would question that and say, and did question that and say, listen, less administrators, more teachers in the classroom.
Amy Edmonds is my guest. She's joining me on the YouTube feed, and we're going to try another call here so we can understand this one. This is Glenn, who's on the phone.
Hey, Glenn, this is Scott.
Yes,
I got a question here. Boy, there's a lot of feedback.
There is. Okay, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and let you go. Sorry about that. I'm sorry, Amy. Something happened. Something zapped the board and got into our phone system yesterday. Now, everybody who calls the show today sounds like we're in some Transformer movie. And
it does. It does.
All right. Well, people can find more information through Wyoming Liberty Group and you. How do they find you?
www.wyoliberty.org. O-R-G.
Okay, and your articles are posted there as well? Articles or?
Yes. Glenn, if I can give them one other.
Yes, please.
That works for you?
Yes.
www.republicfreechoice.org.
Okay.
That's where you'll also find it.
Okay, and just go ahead and look up your name when they get there, or any particular.
Yeah, they'll see on the right hand side. They'll see the columns that I've written.
Okay. Amy, thanks for coming in. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Glenn.
All right. 8:25 is the time.